Welcome to another edition of Stand Alone, where we go from being ordinary to extraordinary. You know, when we think about what we have to do, what we have to become, it all falls back into how we think. And a lot of us are really big on toughening up, and we understand mental toughness more than ever before. But I'm here to bring you the best of the best. You know, many years ago, I ran into this wonderful book talking about the 177 mental toughness secrets, right? And it was really about changing the way that we think. And Steve Siebold, he is very serious. He is the best of the best when it comes to mental toughness and this whole movement that has started. And it started off with him really having conversations with 1,300 millionaires and billionaires and collecting the data and having the courage to share it with the world. Because if we could learn how to think differently, we could create a better and a more extraordinary world. And Steve, you're the author of multiple bestsellers sold in over 30 countries. You're in the top 1% of all professional speakers in the world. So it is an honor, a privilege to have you here today, where we're going to dissect something that is so important. You know, a lot of people don't start talking about this until much later in life. And I believe that it's one of the most important things that we have to get our hands on as soon as possible. And that's our children. You know, and you have this book, Secrets that Self-Made Millionaires really instill in their children. And I wanted to really dissect this because for a lot of us, there's stuff that you talk about that intertwines into all of your books. And we're going to get into that today. But first, I wanted to just really open up by saying thank you for your time. I know how valuable and important you are to the world. And I know that we're going to help so many people today. But I want to kick off by asking you, why children? Why this conversation now? Instead of talking about what you continuously talk about, what made you realize that we've got to really help the kids?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the intro, Sabrina. I'm glad to be on your show, and congratulations on all your success with the show and everything you're doing. Yeah, I started interviewing self-made millionaires in 1984. So I was a kid myself. I was 20 years old or 19 years old when I started. And one of the questions I included in the interviews, I've been interviewing, as you said, I've interviewed over 13, I think I'm at 1,324. These are all in-person interviews. These aren't over Zoom. There was no Zoom. There was no internet. These are all in person around the world. So yeah, so Wall Street Journal was the largest study ever done on self-made millionaires. But I just did it to learn myself because I wanted to become one someday. And one of the questions I asked them was, what do you teach your kids about money and wealth and prosperity and success and all those things that you think the middle class does not, and the other classes in terms of socioeconomic classes? And this is what basically this Secret Self-Made Millionaires teach their kids is all based on their answers to that question, just in my writing basically, but really it's their answers. So it's just the difference between what they teach their kids, and I found over the years, and what the average person teaches their kids is like they're living in a different world.
I agree with this so very much. I always say there's great power in preparation. And it's funny because I live in a good area in Illinois, and there was a soccer game that my son was partaking in, and it was in Illinois. It should be nice, but it was freezing cold. It was like rain, but the rain felt like hail. And you know what was so good, Steve, is that not a parent batted an eyelash. The coaches were like, stay on the field and play. And it was like we were doing something to our children. We were getting them prepared for the real world. We were telling them that weather does not get to affect your performance, only if you allow it to. So when you talk about this, I wanted to break down today a couple key things that you go over in this great book. One of them is that people aren't equal, right? People aren't equal. And when you talk about this, you talk about people trying to soothe their emotional insecurities. And I think this is a very powerful line, because a lot of us today, I find people are very emotionally unstable. And then we get into this thing that you call magical thinking, like kind of like we say these statements like, we're all the same, we can all do it. And I've always known like that's not true. That's not true, right? We're same as a human race, but we are different in our skills, right? Can you speak on that? Like, why does a child need to know this so that they're prepared to do well and unequalize themselves in the future?
Yeah, this one got me in a little trouble. When the book came out a few years ago, it landed on the cover of Money Magazine, back when Money Magazine was still being published. They're out of business now, but as far as their print issues go. But I got a lot of feedback about this from the Money Magazine. They did a big spread of the book, and this is one of the things they talked about. And what I meant was, obviously, people have the same value. I mean, no one's better than anyone else. That doesn't matter how successful they are or not successful they are. We're all valuable people, and we're all equal that way. But in terms of skills and intellect and different things, we're not equal. I mean, if I could throw a football like Tom Brady, I'd be throwing a football for Tom Brady, for the Tampa Bay that he plays for now, and if I could do things like, if I could sing like Adele, I'd be singing like Adele, but we're not equal that way. And so in so many different ways, we're unequal. But I think, to your point, we have this magical thinking, especially in America. I love America. It's a great country. It's been good to you. It's been good to me. But we're a very emotionally immature country. And we have people saying things now like, well, this is my truth. It's like, there's not your truth or my truth. There's the truth, and there's all these things that are going on. And like you say, I love your example about the kids playing sports, because you do have to prepare them for the real world. And if you don't, they're going to get slaughtered. Yes. And most people do get slaughtered. I mean, that's the real truth of it. So I think we've got to get away from magical thinking and say, look, the world is a beautiful place, and it's also a brutal place. And it's a dichotomy of an order of a magnitude. It's hard to exaggerate, but it is what it is. We can make up stories, or we can tell them the truth. I think we should be telling them the truth about the way it really works.
Right. And I think that a lot of people have to open up themselves to saying, well, if I wasn't trained this way by my parents, then I have to get around an environment of people that have the courage to tell me what is real instead of what sounds good. You talk about this where you talk about reality versus delusion. And I love that you're talking about that example of the truth, because I deal with this a lot in business where, young people, we're dealing with how they were trained for the first 20 years of their life, 25 years, and then it's overcoming that. So what is the role of being open-minded in becoming a millionaire? Because this is another point that you make where you teach people and the children that you have to learn how to think for yourself, right? That we are all being programmed. But one of the things that you go over is the difference between rebellion versus prudence. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I think this is really important. It's not about being difficult. It's about developing the skill of critically thinking through things that people are lacking today.
Yeah, I think you're right about the open-minded part too, that you have to, I think if you want to be successful, let's call it self-made millionaire or anything else, any success you want to have in your life, I think you have to be open, especially to mentors, because most self-made millionaires had mentors. I mean, that's a common theme among all the interviews for 38 years, is they had someone that guided them. So they were open-minded to be guided. And then they had to be willing to let go of their delusional thinking about, like you said, maybe the way they were raised by maybe parents, well-intended as they may be, parents, coaches, teachers, clergy, people of influence that said, this is the way the world works. This is the way things are, even though most of them probably were failing at what they were doing. But people can pass on only what they have. And so I think you have to be willing to open your mind, be open-minded to a mentorship and different ways of thinking if you want to get a different result. Because I think, again, we all know the saying, if you do the same thing over and over, expect a different result. I think it's insanity is what they say. It's close to it if it's not. So I think that's a big part of it. You've got to get grounded in the facts, critical thinking, as you say, as opposed to this magical delusional thinking that's, politically correct, but factually inaccurate.
Love it. And this is where like the youth and like people today need the most help with, and I believe that leadership right now, leaders are being called to have the courage to speak against nonsense, right? And not be afraid to be like, I don't want to say that. I don't want to offend someone, right? So you gave an analogy of a billionaire that you were working with, and he had called you in to talk to his team, and they were already really high performing individuals. I love this because number one, you have a billionaire that's reaching out to you And so that's saying right away that he doesn't feel like everything has to come from me and I have all the answers. If you can speak on that, like the people at the top are always looking for more. And then number two, like they're always trying to get to the next level. These are already ultra successful individuals. I believe they were like day trading in your speech, and you were teaching them how to lighten up but still perform. And if you could speak about like how top performers are still playing to win, even when they're at the top, they're still looking to push it to the next level. They stop competing and they get into this creative space of what could I really become? If you could touch on this, because I'm just so sure that you've met some phenomenal people, and the privilege of you being around them and them talking to you, like what have they downloaded inside of you that maybe you hasn't made it in the books and those personal conversations that you've had with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the key differences I found, because I get this question all the time in the press, is what's the difference between the self-made millionaire and the self-made billionaire in terms of psychology? And I would say for the easiest answer and probably the most accurate answer I know is that the billionaires, the self-made billionaires, not the inherited billionaires, they learn to let their egos go. And they open up and they ask for help and they do what they did to get where they are, as opposed to saying a lot of self-made millionaires come from nothing and they work their way up. And then all of a sudden they think, well, now everyone's praising them all the time because now no one says no to you once you have money. Everyone wants to, something from you, money especially. And so you get to the point where if you drink, like the old saying is smell the perfume, but don't drink it. And like praise, as a parallel. And but a lot of people do. And I think the self-made billionaires learn to say, you know what, like Elon Musk, I think is a good example. He learns to let his ego go and listen to feedback. And that's how they transcend. And I think a lot of people see people like for example, Donald Trump, not to be political, because that's not the purpose of this, but Donald Trump was a client of ours for 15 years. I lived 6 miles from his house at Mar-a-Lago. I used to go there a lot. And I think people see people like that on TV, not politically, but just as an ego, whether you love Trump or hate Trump, whatever, obviously is a giant ego. That's an inherited billionaire, not an inherited billionaire, but pretty close. That's not a self-made billionaire. It's inherited, more of an inherited billionaire. That's a different mentality. I interviewed the heirs from Johnson & Johnson, DuPont, I mean, you just name it, and who became inherited billionaires. And it's a different psychology. But the people that let their ego go and they say, you know what, wherever I've gotten to is great. I probably got a lot of help getting there. I need more help. I want to ask for more help. And that's why billionaires sometimes will call and, or multimillionaires or whatever. And they say, hey, I want to go to the next level. What are we missing? What can't I see? That's how they got where they are to begin with. And they go back to that. And then they just, launch again to the next level of success.
I love that. And, even speaking about Donald Trump, one of the things that I think he's navigated so very well is just, understanding that politics was new to him, media, marketing was new to him. So just getting in circles and even speaking to younger crowds, which is, very, maybe not as comfortable, but it helps to like push him forward. So I love that you're saying this, because your ability to keep an open mind is what will separate you from the masses. And you talk about this a lot, right? The masses versus the people that can really unequalize themselves. And your terminology is world class. And I love this, right? Because a lot of us get hooked up in titles and positions. And like, does that mean if I'm, first class that I'm less than you? No, it's what did that person have to do? Who did they have to become to unequalize themselves? Because they were probably in the masses and then they had to separate themselves. So as a child, right? If I have 3 young children, and I'm so understanding of how important it is to speak the right things to them, to cultivate their minds right now. When you're dealing with children, like, when is it too soon? Do you know the answer to that? Did anyone ever share that with you, where like give them that time to have that magical thinking and then start to really set it straight for them, or do it from the beginning? Because I believe that suffering creates greatness, right? And if we pamper our children too much, are we really preparing them to do well in the future?
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point. And in the interest of full disclosure, I have no children, so that's so factor that into the parameters of my answer here. But that being said, during these interviews over the years, that's one of the things. What you just said is what they said. Basically, it's really never too young to get started. Make sure you start kind of programming them while they're really programmable, while they're really young, and giving them the truth, telling them the truth about things. Obviously, age appropriate, conversations.
Yes.
But that being said, starting them early, because they're going to be deluged with nonsense. And of course, now the world has changed so much. There's so much, whatever you want to call it, fake news or false news or whatever. And people make things up and then a bunch of people believe them because the world's full of sheep, unfortunately. Nice people, valuable people, but just sheep in terms of just following people. They'll make stuff up and people will follow it, and with no proof, evidence, and data to back it up. So I think that people that have children are in a tough position because there's so much out there. They have so much easy access to information where we didn't have that growing up before the internet. And I think you've got to set them straight, because like you say, if they don't position themselves to get in situations where they might suffer a little or play in the rain, like you're saying, or bad weather, or, go through tough times and realize that's part of life. That's the way it is. Sorry, I apologize about that. I feel bad about that, but that's the way it is. Life is tough, and it can be really, really tough. And if you don't prepare them, they're just going to get killed out there, and so I think you have to start them as young as you can.
Yeah. And you talked about this. I think this is powerful too, because it's a part of who you are. You got, interested in learning how to become mentally tough because you were playing tennis, right? And I think this is why sports is so important for people. And it landed you in a different arena with different people, right? You also talk about this in the book where you're talking about have them play rich sports. Could you elaborate on that and how that helped to propel you as opposed to doing just what everyone else was doing?
Yeah, this is another one I've taken a lot of heat for, Sabrina.
No, I love it. Let's talk about the ones you've gotten heat for. I love this.
Oh man, MSNBC. I've gotten grilled about this from Chicago Sun-Times, where you are, not too far. Well, I won't say the town you live in, because I don't know if you disclose that on your podcast, but you live in a very rich town. I grew up close to your town, but not in a rich town. Your town those were the rich people were. And you learn pretty fast that the rich kids play sports like tennis and golf, and the poor kids, not all, I'm generalizing here, of course, but a lot of the kids from the poor neighborhoods and the poor places play basketball and football and different sports like that, which are great. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that as it goes forward into college and after college, the football's over, unless you're Tom Brady or you're a great player. If basketball's over, typically, because you get too old to do it. But tennis is not, and golf especially is probably the best. Polo is a good one. Lacrosse is another rich kid sport. And what happens is those rich families gravitate towards rich sports because they're expensive. It's expensive to raise a good tennis player or a good golfer. Lessons are expensive, tournaments are expensive, training is expensive, travel and all those things, where a lot of other sports are not. And so there's nothing wrong with the sports. It's just that when you get in those circles, you gain an unfair advantage as a young person because you have contacts with people. I have contacts in tennis literally all over the world from playing in junior tennis. I only made it 2 years in the pro, so I was no big deal as a pro. So the contacts didn't come from there. They came from junior tennis, where I know people from all over the world. And I think 30 of them are hedge fund managers. Probably 200 of them are multimillionaires. Probably 10 are billionaires that I know personally just from those tennis days, because those were rich kids that went to Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Yale, and it gives you an unfair advantage that you just can't buy in any other way. So why not direct your kids towards those sports if they're interested, obviously, but as opposed to the poor sports where usually don't get those rich families.
Yeah. And I think this is something it's important for parents to think about. For me, this is something that I never grew up this way, but as I have boys, because we were all girls growing up, as I have boys, I know they have this natural thing to play sports, but I'm thinking who are you playing with? What will be the conversations that you engage into? And as a parent, that's my responsibility to be able to plant better seeds in them. I love this. Ready for another hot one. I love this that you wrote this in the book because I actually teach this to our children right now. And most people would think why are you talking about this with your kids? Because the sooner they know it, the more they're going to realize how true it is later on. And this topic in the book you talk about is government is not your friend. And when you go into this, it's not that you're speaking ill of government, but rich and wealthy people understand the role of government very differently than how the masses experience the government. Can you talk about this? Because if we wait to teach our children, or we wait for them to experience the government when they're in their 20s or 30s, when they first start paying taxes, or however that may happen, it might be too late. They might have had like 30 years of a different type of training. Why is it important for children to understand government and to know that they're not your friend? And that's okay, that a lot of people in this world are not supposed to be your friends.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. I think it's critical that we know, and we're not taught this in school. I mean, we're not taught that the government's really not a friend. I mean, think about where the government gets their money. One place, the taxpayers, us.
Yeah.
That's it. And I don't care if you're Democrat, Independent, Republican, they all are big spenders and they're all liars. And I don't mean that like they're all terrible people, but they lie about what they're going to do. And we all know it. I mean, now it's I don't even know what to say about the political landscape. It's just not even worth getting into, because we'd be here for 6 hours talking about it. But I think no matter what party, you tend to lean toward, you've got to realize that they want more of your money. They can say, oh, we're going to cut taxes. We're the party of low taxes. Oh, they're lying. They're not. Taxes are going up. So that's going to, as a person that becomes successful financially, the more successful you become, the more they think you owe them. And you'll hear people say, the government say, Elon Musk is not paying his fair share. I guarantee you, he paid millions and millions and millions of dollars in taxes, more than most people ever pay in 20 lifetimes. He pays in 3 months in a quarterly tax. But they demonize him because he's so rich. Well, he's successful. He's created value for people. He should be rich. It's a capitalistic society. That's the way free markets operate. But the government doesn't see it like that a lot of times. Again, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, or whatever. They are not your friend. They want more of your money. So I think you have to understand that there's a lot of, politicians typically become politicians to gain power and soothe their egos. I mean, I've worked at tons of them in Washington, and they're big egos, and some of them are very nice people. But bottom line is, if you don't understand how they think, then you're going to get taxed to death. And that's one of the big things when you have money, is that's your biggest bill, or taxes. That's what billionaires talk about at cocktail parties. They don't talk about the football game or who's dating Jennifer Aniston in Hollywood. They don't care. Or who won the Academy Award, or who slapped who, Chris Rock, Will Smith. They care about taxes because that's where they're getting hammered. Contrary to public opinion, they're still paying millions in taxes. So understanding government, understanding taxation, understanding the laws around money are very important. And kids, you can teach them the basics, even when they're young. Kids are smart. They pick it up pretty fast.
I love that you're saying this, because whenever I speak to people, and if I bring up an issue, people will say, like, I don't want to talk about politics, but I believe that the wealthy people are talking about politics. They're getting connected to the politicians and the politics to have a greater say. And then the other thing is, like, I don't want to talk about, politics, religion, all this stuff, but I think it's about having those hard conversations. And if you look at people today, when you talk about this magical thinking, and I'm seeing how it all connects, and then emotional insecurities that people have. So we get more to ourselves. So we don't have these conversations that build up our courage and our ability to critically think ourselves to a better level. I think it's so important, more than ever, that we talk to our children, because this is how we are going to shape our future. And so you writing this book is powerful because it allows for us to have the topics to start this discussion. And I love how you set it up where it's, just read a chapter. You have a workbook that goes along with it too, which I'm going to do just to set the tone and set the stage. You talk about this and it's very powerful. Another thing that I believe is huge, especially for today, because we all experienced it through COVID, right? A lot of us are raised in these households where the old thinking was work for a big corporation, right? Stay there as long as possible. That's where your safety is. Some of us were raised like work for the government. In Canada, that is the language of all the adults, work for the government. And it's like, oh my goodness. But in here, you talk about security doesn't exist. And the one thing that will make you the most secure is your ability to perform. And I'd love for you to tie this into why you have to be mentally tough today more than ever, because your security is based on your ability to be mentally tough so that you can continuously perform.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that, the critical thinking on this would be in a free market economy like the United States, or any free market economy for that matter, Canada or anywhere else, that if you want to know how to get wealthy, or whatever you want to call it, rich, wealthy, financially independent, whatever you want to call it, you solve problems. And the bigger problem you solve, the richer you get. And that's it. That's the end of the story. In a free market, that's the end of the story. So we look for problems to solve. And if you're looking for security, it's in money. And I know, again, like you say, sex, politics, religion, money, thing people go, oh, I can't talk about, I want to offend anyone. Well, maybe, and the masses do get offended. They get offended by anything. As long as you have a difference in opinion and you bring it up at a cocktail party, forget it. I belong to a yacht club about 3 miles away from our house here in Atlanta, and it's just a little small yacht club. It's not real fancy, but the people just get irate if I bring up anything political. And I think it's funny because I don't care if they think something different,
Right.
But the average mind just doesn't take it like that. They take offense if you're different. And so I think that security really is in money. People think that's, I get criticized for that too. People, oh, money, it's not everything. No, it's not everything, but it will make you secure. You will sleep better at night. And once you are financially stable, hopefully no one really can take it from you except the government. Hopefully they won't. But that's why you seek opportunity, I think, for security. And the security is in your own hands. But it really does, as you mentioned, Sabrina, it starts with your thinking.
Yes. And then this ties into something you communicate a lot about, and it ties into why you also need courage, because you talk about approval addiction. If you could share this with why we want our children to have the courage to not just always want approval. Of course, that's in all children, right? But the sooner they get to understand that, you're going to do things, you're going to fail through things. And when you fail, it'll feel like you don't have everyone's approval, but that's okay. That's how you make it in the real world. Could you talk about this? Because I know that you can't have this in you if you want to be at the upper echelon. You have to be able, you talk about desensitize yourself. And it's something, especially being a woman in business, people think like I'm cold. I'm like, no, I'm just desensitized. I'm not allowing you to affect me. I'm in control of my emotions. You're not going to make me start crying, save that for someone else. And it's important when you talk about this. I love this because I almost feel like it's a praise when someone says that I'm cold. I don't know, but if you can talk about this is powerful.
Yeah, I think it's maybe the ultimate success killer is the addiction to the approval of other people's opinions about you, what they think, the way you talk, what you say, how you say it. I mean, it's a big deal. We did a tour right before COVID. We did a national tour, and we sold $2 billion tickets, just $2 million in tickets, just to talk about for 3 hours approval addiction around the country. It's crazy. I couldn't believe the popularity of it because for us, that's a lot. And people were just really into it. And what they said was, we had thousands of people attend these seminars, and they said, I've been addicted to approval my whole life. I've been trying to please people my whole life. And that is the costliest thing you can do, especially as an entrepreneur. If you're addicted to other people's opinions, you will get criticized. I went on the Today Show one time and said, look, they asked me about this book I wrote. Kathy Lee Gifford was the host, and Hoda Kotb at that time. And she said, well, what about people getting fat? I said, look, if you're fat, it's your fault. I said, here's the solution. Grow up emotionally, get tough and fix it, or don't. But realize it's not the food companies. It's not the pizza companies. Hey, I've done it. I've gained weight before. I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just saying if I got fat, it's no one else's fault but mine. So I own it. And I'm suggesting you own it. 3 people threatened to kill me before the end of the 5-minute segment. And they wouldn't the Today Show would not let me out of the studio for about an hour. And I was going to Good Morning America next. And they gave me security when I went to Europe. They gave me security in Australia because people were threatening me because I said, if you're fat, it's your fault. How is it someone else's fault if you get fat? Or you lose weight, how does that, but it's delusional. It's this delusional thinking, this coddling of the American consciousness. And that's based in approval addiction. I really believe that's where it starts, is that I care more about what you think about me than what I think about me. And that's a very, very limited place. It's a dangerous place to be. As an entrepreneur, you're dead. You might as well go get a job and forget about it, because you're not going to make it, because people will criticize you as soon as you step out, just like you have been building your business, right? How many times have you been criticized and you don't even know how many times, because most of it's gone on behind your back as well as everyone else's. But you're tough enough to say, hey, look, that's the real world. Grow up and get on with it, or don't, or just forget it and do something where no one says anything about you that you don't like.
How do you train people to deal with that approval that people innately have from their family? Because I think that's something I see a lot of people struggle with. It's their family that they're seeking approval from, but what they're wanting for you isn't necessarily what is going to get you to where you should be in life. How do you train that toughness in a person to like stop seeking that from family members?
Yeah, according to psychiatrists, there's only one cure, a real cure for, and they don't even call it a cure, but it's a way to reduce the addiction to approval, which is very, very high in most people, especially in America. It's a very soft country emotionally in that way. And what they say is it's called systematic desensitization. It's kind of a mouthful. Systematic desensitization. Basically, whatever you're getting disapproval doing, you keep doing it. It's the same way as if you have a phobia, like if you're afraid of snakes. This is where they actually came up with the theory in the 1940s in South Africa. They do the same thing. You show the person a snake and they freak out. You say, okay, take a deep breath, calm down, and show them a snake again. It might be 6 feet away from them, but they're freaking out because they have a phobia for snakes. So even if they look at a picture of a snake, they freak out. But after a while, as they expose them systematically, they expose them to the snake. 6 months later, they're holding a snake in their hands going, it's just a snake. It's not going to hurt me. It's no big deal. They systematically desensitized from the fear of the snake. It's the same way with approval addiction. So if you're saying, let's say people are saying no to you in your business, you're asking them, as we do as entrepreneurs, we hear no all the time. People think we hear yes all the time. No, we hear no more in a day than most people hear in a year. I mean, it's all people tell us no, they ignore us all the time. I don't care how much money you have, how much success you have. You're getting ignored if you're in the game. You're getting blown off. You're getting rejected. And so if that's, say, like you're taking it personally and saying, well, who are they to call me or think about this or say no to me? It's like, get over it, because that's the way it works, no matter how high you go. And so what you do is you keep walking into it. You keep walking into it. It's like asking someone, if you're single and you're asking someone out, you're at a singles bar and you want to dance with someone and they keep rejecting you. The best thing you can do to desensitize is keep asking, because eventually you won't care what they say. And that's called systematic desensitization. It's not the easiest thing to do, because you have to go through the gauntlet, so to speak. But once you do, you're never the same. It's so freeing. It's so empowering that effectively there's no punishment emotionally when people say no to you anymore, because it just doesn't mean anything to you.
Yeah, this is powerful. What's funny is I've never been a fan of insects or bugs. And in university, we had these zoology labs where there was a Madagascar cockroach. And we had to pick it up, and then it would open its wings and would make this hissing noise. And I was like, talk about like getting immersed into something that you are afraid of. But it really made me look at animals a different way. Like it's just constantly putting yourself in those environments. And this speaks to you. This is why you're hired by like Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Toyota, Caterpillar, all these major companies to really train people in the sales world. What could you speak to about the future? Because I didn't know anything about sales, Steve. I studied to become a doctor, and then I kind of got thrusted into this industry, and thank God I'm a learner. So I just picked up books. I started to read about what I had to do to develop sales skills. But the more I think about it, the more I understand that nothing happens until a sale is made. And if we don't get people to overcome their emotions, we'll get less and less people being great at sales. And now more than ever, we have to get responsible, great people in this industry. What could you speak to about the future of sales? And why do we need more coaches now? Do we need more people to reinforce this? Because you trained some very, very successful people in the sales world. What do you see about what is becoming and how powerful they are, and what we need to have in the future to really protect this industry?
Sure. Well, in the book we talk about rich people rule the world, and I think that's true. Salespeople drive the world.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love
I mean,
it.
right. I mean, there's so many, we do turnarounds for major companies, as you mentioned, like all kinds of big companies and their sales teams that are underperforming. And basically we go in and say, look, let's look at the psychology of sales. Is a pretty simple process. Once you're past the fear of rejection, you listen to what the need is and you try to fulfill the need. And most salespeople don't listen enough, but it's something that's pretty easy to learn. Most spouses don't listen to their spouse enough either, but it's easy to learn. But what the difficult thing I think is for salespeople that I've been working with so many years is the rejection factor, like we just talked about, because they are addicted to approval. And, they go in, they try to sell like we all do. And as entrepreneurs and salespeople, and you're getting rejected 95% of the time, and you're succeeding 5%, maybe if you're a top person as an entrepreneur or a salesperson. And that means 95% of the time you're losing. And I think once you get your arms around that's the game. That's the way it works. You've got the courage, you've got the mental toughness, you've got the fortitude to keep hearing no in order to get to a yes. And salespeople are the most powerful people. I mean, as an army, they're the most powerful people. Obviously, you have senior executives and you've got the geniuses like the Steve Jobs of the world and the Elon Musk of the world, which are obviously Tom Brady in football. They're anomalies, statistical anomalies. I mean, they're 1 in 10 million. But other than that, salespeople, in my opinion, are the army that drives everything in the world, all revenue in the free world. And they should be looked upon with the highest of regard, like entrepreneurs, because they make things happen. They pay for everyone else's salaries, and yet they don't typically get the recognition that they really deserve.
I love this. It's the truth. What you're speaking is the truth. And, just to tie this all together for the audience, the point of standing alone is to have leadership in your life, right? It's not to just accept whatever's happening, but to stake your existence on things that are the truth that can get you to a higher level, right? And when I first got introduced to you, this was one of the first books I've read. I actually read, I think it's Die Fat or Get Tough. That was your other. I love that book. I think that's a must read for everyone. I love that book.
That was my death threat book.
No, I know, but you know what? This is what the world needs. And this is what I wanted to close with for everyone, because it brings me back to what you always refer to about an objective reality. And I really believe that if there's one skill, and in all my years of working with hundreds of leaders and thousands of agents, I know this is the greatest obstacle, where you see people that can make it over this hump or people that just fall to the wayside because they are not being real with who they are and where they are. So if you could tie this in, because if we have to leave everyone with a powerful lesson for them to sit down with themselves and really ask an important question, like, am I open to a coach telling me who I really am? Can I internalize that so I can change? So what is having an objective reality? Why is this so important to be successful in this world? And why do you have to innately have a form of mental toughness to really listen to that objective reality?
Yeah, this is the first chapter in the 177 Mental Toughness Secrets book, and that's the one chapter I wanted to be the 177 chapters. That was the one I picked to be number one. That's the only one. It's in order, basically. The rest of them are randomly selected. But I don't think you can really be mentally tough until you see the world as it is, as opposed to the way you wish it were or was. You have to see it and I think that takes mental toughness, just to say, look, here's what people say, well, love makes the world go round. Well, that would be a really nice thing, and I wish it were true. It's not. Money makes the world go round. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It just is what it is. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. You can prove it. And the world is a history of war. You can track the history of the world by war. It's not a pretty sight, but it is what it is. And that's reality. You didn't create it. I didn't create it. We landed here. So in order to navigate the landscape, we need to know what the landscape really is, not the delusional thinking. So let's take, for example, financial services, insurance industry. I mean, I worked for that industry for so long. I worked for Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, all of them. RBC in Canada, which, very well, is the largest employer in Canada. Most of them. And I think one of the objective reality examples I would use in this context would be how people look at insurance companies. And I think when you look at people say, well, it's insurance, insurance people chase you down and they're always, bugging you about buying it. It's all about dying and that kind of thing. It's like, no, here's the objective reality. Insurance people are among the most important people, salespeople or other, in business, because if you really understand how insurance products works, you recognize that they're far more powerful than even things like hedge funds, which are just really for extremely wealthy people. Whereas insurance products can be used to grow money in tax advantaged ways. There's all kinds of things you can do with insurance products. If you get a good person to really help you out, those insurance people are among the most important salespeople and business people in the world. If you understand it through objective reality, the way it works. And if you don't, get with an insurance professional, get them to explain some things to you, and you realize that it's not just about death benefit and dying. There's all kinds of things you can do with money that rich people do. Look at the annual report of any public corporation, Microsoft, all of them down the road. They own hundreds, if not thousands, of insurance contracts. Why do you think they do? We can't get into it because it's a long conversation. Ask your insurance person, or get one if you don't have one, to explain why they have millions and millions of dollars in insurance contracts. It's not probably what you think. But I think that's an objective reality that most people think. They think it's one thing, yet it's completely something far beyond what they actually know. And I think you got to be an objective reality to really succeed at the end of the day.
Yeah, you are 100% correct. Steve, I just want to say thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you for having the courage to put it into words and into books where we could gain access to great and real information. I always encourage people to say, listen, social media, all these platforms, they can build you or they can destroy you. It's based upon who you decide to listen to and follow. So where can people find you? How can we follow you? How can we learn more about what you're teaching? Because it's really important that we set our minds correctly daily, and not just, one time, but just in preparing for this, I reread this book. Thank God I'm a fast reader. I reread this book because I already had them. Right? And just rereading it, you better believe my kids are going to have a different week because of what's set in my mind right now. So where can we go to follow you, find you, and how can we learn more about gaining this mental toughness that's so incredibly important for our future?
Well, now you know why I get all the threats.
It's okay.
People don't want to hear
valuable,
the truth, Sabrina,
because you're valuable.
They just don't want to hear it. Well, we have a new podcast, actually. I appreciate you asking. I'm pretty excited about it, where we go into more depth. It's called mentaltoughnesspodcast.org, mentaltoughnesspodcast.org. It's all free, of course, as podcasts are. They can watch it, they can listen to it. And I'm trying to go into more depth. I've been very lucky. I'm, in business and everything. And this is kind of my time to give back as much as I can. And we're trying to do that through this little podcast. And so people can go to the website, subscribe to it. It's all free and everything. And, we'd love to have you as part of the base.
Oh, I love that. And I have one more question for you. Who is someone that you met that was like very influential and they were better than you imagined? Sometimes we have this image of, people that we want to meet. And then when we meet them, we're like, oh no, that was horrible. But I think you've just met so many great people throughout all these conversations. Who is someone, or has it even happened where someone was better than you expected?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've had a lot of opportunity to meet a lot of people around the world. One that sticks out is a gentleman named Larry Wilson, who founded a company called Wilson Learning. It's the second largest training company to this day in the world. He's passed away years ago. But when I first met him, I was a big fan. I'd read his books, and he was the most successful corporate speaker and trainer, consultant in big corporations in the history of our industry. And so I wanted to meet him because he was my hero. And for years and years and years, from high school on. And when I met him at an airport in Miami Airport, and we sat down in a little area, the cubby hole of the airport, and he started asking me questions. And I was just thrilled. I was shaking. I was because he was the biggest you could get in our industry, in the history of the industry. And I said he was willing to meet with me flying in from overseas at the airport. And he started asking me questions. So, well, tell me about what you're doing. Tell me. And he asked me questions for 2 hours, and I was there to ask him questions. I was there to interview him, and he never stopped asking me questions. And I walked away thinking, I just can't even believe that, because I had very, very little success at that time. And I was just a student, basically trying to learn. And he was asking me about all my stuff. And I'd never been that influenced that quickly by any individual in my entire life before or since. He was an amazing guy.
I love that. Well, you're amazing. You're powerful. Thank you for the work. Thank you for your time today. And may you continue to do this great work, because we all are so privileged to be able to receive it. So thank you, Steve. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate being on the show. Congratulations on the show's success. I know you've done really well, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of your episodes.
Thank you.